Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card at the end of your first year.
Welcome, good evening, salutations. How y'all doing today? It's good to see we have a nice room and gathering. I'm really excited and looking forward to today's conversation. No matter what platform you are on, you can engage with us in the chat. We love to see your reflections, your vibrations, drop your questions. I'm really glad that you all are here with us today. I'm Natasha, the interim organizing director for About Face. I'm a proud member. About Face was formerly known, some of you may know, as Iraq Veterans Against the War. We are a member organization of post 9/11 veterans. We are organizing to end a foreign policy of permanent war and the use of military weapons, tactics, values in communities across the globe and here even at home. A little about me: I served 20 years on active duty in the Air Force, retiring in 2016. Of those 20 years, 8 were spent overseas across operations Northern Watch, Iraqi, and Enduring Freedom. The deep personal moral injury that I experienced today is a reflection of those years spent participating in this nation's post 9/11 forever wars. So today's conversation is really important to us, to my team, and what we really envision for today is for us to have an open, honest conversation around, here we are at the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And soon to be 20 years of the beginning of the forever wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we are not, fooled to believe that the drawdown of troops in in Afghanistan is the end of things. It's just going to look different. And so today we'll get into some of that talk and discussion with this dynamic panel. It's an opportunity tonight for you to listen, to learn, to teach, to listen with empathy and questions, and really to just open your chest around areas where we might disagree or you might not understand. Feel free again to use the chat, drop your reflections. The panel would love to hear you just, say that you're enjoying this talk, but also drop your questions as well. I'm excited to get to it. Again, this dynamic panel I'm excited and I'm looking forward to it. So I'll just do a brief introduction of our panel and then we'll get started. Lita is an Afghan American community organizer based in Washington, D.C., and received her master's in intercultural and international communications from American University. She is the co-founder of the Afghan Diaspora for Equality and Progress and Afghans for a Better Tomorrow, and leads national campaigns on anti-Muslim bigotry. Her writing has been published in Newsweek and has been cited in Al Jazeera, Vox, LA Times, and Business Insider, among other media and outlets globally. Oliver is a veteran of the 187th Infantry Regiment and was deployed twice to the war on Iraq as part of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team and the 101st Airborne Division between 2002 and 2006. He graduated San Francisco State with a Bachelor of Science in 2020 and has been an active member of About Face Veterans Against the War since 2018. Ollie will organize around numerous issues, but feels deeply compelled to show up for issues regarding sovereignty of those native to Turtle Island, police violence, issues facing the Kurdish people, whom he had the privilege to spend time with in Bashur, the southern province of Kurdistan, to some, northern Iraq to others. Ali is a warrior, a scientist, a musician, and overall just a chill dude. And Nazarene is the child of immigrants of Afghanistan. She was born in the US and has lived in Minnesota her entire life. She is an educator, teaching science to high schoolers, attends Ashburn University, working towards her master's in teaching, and is the founding director of Brewing Change Collaborative, advocating for BIPOC in the brewing industry. In her spare time, she is involved in several community projects, including most recently the documentation of the graffiti from Minneapolis uprising, where donations drive for encampments, supporting George Floyd Square, and other actions, and other organizing support for the Afghan refugees arriving in the Midwest. In the minutes of downtime she finds time to laugh with family and friends and go on adventures with her partner, Arash. Arash was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, and moved to Los Angeles with his family at the age of 10 due to war. September 11, 2001 was a life-changing moment for him, as it forced him to pay attention to politics and encouraged him to get involved. He's since been organizing and disrupting the status quo in one way or another. In 2017, he moved to Greece to work. In his spare time, he is involved in several community projects, including most recently the documentation of the graffiti in Minneapolis uprising, supporting George Floyd Square, and other actions. His latest project with his partner Nazarene, he is organizing support for the Afghan refugees arriving in the Midwest. Dr. Maha Halal is a researcher and writer on institutionalized Islamophobia and author of the forthcoming book, Innocent Until Proven Muslim, Islamophobia, The War on Terror, and the Muslim Experience Since 9/11. Her writings have appeared in Vox, Al Jazeera, Mid-East Eye, Newsweek, Business Insider, and Truth Out. She is also co-director of Justice for Muslims Collectives, where she focuses on political consciousness and narrative shifting programming. And finally, John Motter, who served as an infantryman in the Marine Corps from 2007 to 2011. He deployed with the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines to Iraq in 2008 and to Afghanistan in 2010. He is one of the co-founders of Ground Game LA, a community organization based in Los Angeles that works with other local grassroots organizations addressing police brutality and militarization, the criminalization of houseless, tenants' rights, immigration justice, climate justice, and other movement work. John also serves as a About-Face board of directors. Welcome to our esteemed panel. I'm so excited to get us ready. And so without further ado, again, I just want to say, if you are just now joining us, we're getting into our panel discussion. Please feel free to use the chat to share your reflections, your positive vibrations. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat, no matter what platform you're joining us, whether Facebook, YouTube, or viewing us on Twitter. Again, appreciate y'all for joining us. Let's get into it. Lita, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for that, Tasha, and thanks for having us. I'm super excited to be here with my fellow panelists. Wish it was under better circumstances, but excited to hear from everyone. So my name is Lita. I am part of Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. A little bit about myself. I am an Afghan American woman. I'm a Muslim woman. I was just 8 years old when 9/11 happened. Both my parents were forced to leave Afghanistan due to the Soviet invasion, and they were both undocumented. They eventually sought asylum in Germany before they made it to the United States, and a lot of my activism stems from them, their history, and their journey. So the last 3 weeks have been absolutely crazy, to say the least. My fellow community members have become immigration lawyers, activists, and community organizers because they had to save their loved ones from the unknown, doing the job that the United States government refused to do. Afghans for a Better Tomorrow, we've been coordinating evacuations, we've been organizing protests and creating demands for Afghan Americans here and any of one of our allies. And now we're advocating for Afghan refugees to be resettled in the United States and also demanding humanitarian aid to Afghan civil society, so those that have been left behind. America's involvement did not start in 2001. A lot of this conflict can be rooted back to September 11th, but US foreign policy and imperialism dates back at least 40 to 50 years when Afghanistan was being used as a playground for a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 2001, the United States claimed it came to Afghanistan because it cared about democracy, it cared about liberating Afghan women, but in reality, they just felt angry and had to reestablish its power and dominance in the wakes of the 9/11 attacks. They set up torture sites, they aligned themselves with warlords and militia leaders, and what we've seen in the last month is a 20-year-long policy on trying to impose war on the Afghan people. It allowed Pakistan to play a double game, and it did not hold the Pakistani government accountable for its support of the Taliban. It created an Afghan economy dependent on Western aid. It also created so-called democratic institutions that fell with its withdrawal. And it was in such a rush to leave this experiment, this adventure, that it handed over the country to the Taliban and has now aligned itself closer and closer to abusive and repressive regime that intimidates journalists, minorities, and Afghan women that are all demanding for their voices to be heard. It's obvious that the only policy that the United States is comfortable with in places like the Middle East involves the military, and that's it. It's a justification for their reach, their influence, and centering their needs of its people as they did in Afghanistan. I do want to add that the war on terror obviously had caused a lot of harm to Afghans, but the war on terror has impacted other communities in other countries like Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. And also not to mention the Muslim and Sikh communities here in the United States. Even now with the United States leaving, it has left itself in a place where Afghanistan is not a sovereign country. It's ruled by people who are foreign handlers. It's not representative of the Afghan people. And that's a direct effect of the United States spending more than 20 years of imposing a military solution on Afghanistan. Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you, Lita. Thank you for those words. Yeah, let's move us along. We'll have opportunity towards the end for some more roundtable discussion and Q&A. And so let's see, Ollie, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ollie. Thanks for the introduction, Natasha, and thanks to everybody else for being here. So I am fresh back from Line 3 in Minnesota, and I kind of watched the events in Afghanistan unfold from there as sort of, and I felt like a bystander. It's like we're already, you know, in a real tense situation over there. Then watching all of this unfold on top of that was really tough. And one of the things that really burns in my chest right now is that I watched how some of the vet community reacted to this and how they've centered their trauma above the Afghan people, and it makes me really mad. My experience in Iraq is that we were more dangerous to everybody else than they were to us. So it does not ring true to me when we center our trauma above these people who we traumatized. And you can't deny that. We traumatized these people. And then when it's time to help them, I see vets talking about themselves. And I understand that it sucks to lose your friends and that you were traumatized as well. You know, however, you know, the questions, why were we here? And like, was I fighting for nothing, are no longer valid. We've known for a long time what this war is about. Now is not the time for us to center our trauma, like I was saying. And I don't know how to speak on this without doing that myself. And I'm going to just do the best I can. You know, when we pulled out of Iraq, I was drunk. I was drunk because it hurt so bad to see what was happening to the Kurdish people again, and what was happening to all the Sunni and Shia people that live there. And when I see what's happening now in Afghanistan, that people feel so endangered that they have to hang on to the outside of a fucking airplane to get out of that country. And it just reminds me about all the times that we've done that to people. We've done that to people over and over and over again in Vietnam and all these other places. And it should be indicative to all of us that our government never gave a shit about any of those people. We have the resources and the infrastructure to put a bomb or a tank or a soldier anywhere in the world. And I don't buy for a second that we couldn't have made a proper evacuation plan for the people that truly felt in danger for their lives and wanted to leave. And the reason that we didn't have one is because we don't care. As a government, as a military, we don't give a fuck about those people, and nothing anybody can say to me will make me feel any different. And I just, I wish there was more I can do, and I wish I had something more intelligent to say. But now's the time, as white people, as veterans, however you identify, if you're not Afghani, shut up and listen and support. That's all I got right now.
Thanks, Ollie. Appreciate you for keeping it 100. Let's see. Next is up to speak is Nazrin. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nasreen. I am a community organizer, and I have been actively working with other Afghana in Minnesota, as well as outside of Minnesota, to support the refugees that are going to be arriving in the Midwest. So Fort McCoy is about 2.5 hours away from here in Wisconsin. And the numbers that we are getting, as of last week, we were told there were 6,400 refugees that had arrived. And by September 15th, they need to be prepared to have first space for 13,000 refugees in that area. We have been invited twice to go visit Fort McCoy, and twice we've been canceled on. We are working with a lawyer in Wisconsin right now to figure out how we can get access to these folks to see how they're being treated and what they need. We are also organizing efforts to get donations for folks. We do have some families that have arrived, some young women who have been in the same clothes for over 20 some days, families who haven't gotten food stamps, who are getting food donations from neighbors. We are trying to figure out how to support all these folks. We are also working with the state of Minnesota. They have actually been very transparent in the support that they're capable of giving, as well as the resettlement agencies and the emergency management team, which is a group of people that plan for emergencies, and they're all over the state. I'm assuming they're in other states as well. They've also been called on to support these efforts. The Minnesota politicians are asking for thousands more refugees to resettle in Minnesota. Minnesota has a lot of services to support the refugees. We have been told that there will be 20,000 folks coming on the civ visa and 127,000 approximately folks coming on humanitarian visas. The civ visa folks do qualify for refugee benefits, and the humanitarian visa folks qualify for nothing. So there is a need to support these folks as they arrive. Unaccompanied minors are arriving. There are several programs in 15 states that support this to foster these young people, as well as many other organizations around that are doing work to provide legal services to these young people. So we are working with local nonprofit organizations, one called Zaka.org. They are working on helping support the housing issue. So all of these refugees, regardless of visa status, there is no housing available through the feds or the state. So right now it sounds like they're planning on having the refugees, as they are accepted in the states, stay in hotels. Minnesota has currently accepted 70 folks on civ visas and 250 on humanitarian visas. And so there are 4 hotels available that will be there. The state is not paying for them, and neither are the refugee resettlement agencies. They are looking for big donors, which it sounds like they have, to support those efforts. And then they will have legal services available to them in those spaces, as well as nurses on site and mental health support, as well as translators. And all of these things are needed. So folks who want to support these efforts here, please connect with us if you can. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it for the most part.
Okay. I'm sure there's more. There's so much more. My ask to all of you is, especially folks in the Afghan diaspora, to ask questions. You don't need to be part of a nonprofit to organize. So don't think that that is necessary. Grassroots organizing is very important. Community needs to show up. And so everyone needs to show up if they can. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Arash. I've been organizing in one sense or another since 2001, after 9/11. I know this show is about 9/11. It's due to 9/11. So I want to say 9/11 changed my life. You know, I was right off of high school at that point, pretty much. And I had a friend of mine who's Afghan, who had Afghan on the back of his car. He went into a grocery store. By the time he came back out of a grocery store, his car was all smashed up. That was a wake-up call for me. That made me, oh, you know what? I should probably pay attention to politics. Because before that, I hated politics. I wanted nothing to do with it, mostly because I was rebelling towards my parents. My parents were deeply involved in politics, and I didn't want anything to do with that. But it changed my whole life. Ever since then, I've been organizing. And one thing I've noticed, you know, by reading history, understanding history, is that what's going on in Afghanistan has been repeated over and over again by colonizers, mostly the U.S. past few years, the British. They learned from the British, obviously. So the U.S. never went to Afghanistan for benevolent reasons. It never went into Afghanistan to save Afghan women like it claimed it was going to do. It went to Afghanistan for geopolitical positioning, because Afghanistan is in the heart of the world, in a sense, right? You got Iran to the west of it, you got China to the east of it, you got the old Soviet nations in the north of it, and then you got the the Indian subcontinent right below it. If you have positioning in that region, then you can keep an eye on all those countries. You know, some of the biggest enemies of the U.S. are right there, with the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians. That's a big reason why the U.S. went to Afghanistan. One of the main reasons we went to Afghanistan. Also, they can make a lot of money in Afghanistan. You know, a lot of reports came out around that time that Afghanistan was full of minerals, lithium. Afghans obviously did not have the technology then, or now really, to extract all those resources. So guess who did? Who was making money off of it now? And also, there's a pipeline that's going through from the sea into Europe through Ukraine. U.S. is also there to protect the pipeline as well. So there are many things that happen after that, but U.S. never went to Afghanistan for any kind of benevolent reasons. They went to exploit and also create this instability. You know, the old British way of conquering, you destabilize a place, you can control it better, right? If you just also, for the U.S., if Afghanistan was destabilized, then it had reasons, an excuse to stay in Afghanistan, right? The U.S. knows exactly what it's doing. It gives $5 billion a year to ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service, and the Pakistani intelligence service obviously funds the Taliban and all the other groups that are there to destabilize Afghanistan. The U.S. is not ignorant to its ways. It does that on purpose. So these are all political games that have been played. As Lita said, these are all proxy wars, games with Afghans being the pawns. 2.5 million Afghans died in the game where they were playing with Russia, the Soviets, during the 80s. And a few 100,000 Afghans have died since then as well. Afghan lives don't matter to these colonizers, imperialists, and they're just there for their own benefit. That's it for me for now.
Thank you so much, Nasreen and Arash. So powerfully said. I appreciate y'all for being here. Let's see. Up next is John. I have you up next to speak. Are you able to? Okay, there you go. John, the floor is yours.
Hey, y'all. Yeah, some of the stuff Arash was saying just brought up some memories for me. I remember I was in 8th grade on 9/11, and shortly after, this pretty popular local radio DJ came out with a parody album in the style of Dr. Demeno that had a song called Afghanistan that was, I think, in parodying They're Coming to America by Neil Diamond, which is a song about immigrants, just about bombing Afghanistan. Another song called We Will Bomb You, like We Will Rock You. A lot of just like very imperialist songs. This was like a very popular album in my part of Pennsylvania where I grew up, and it was getting played on the radio all the time. People just like lost their minds after 9/11. And then I ended up deploying there almost a decade later in 2010. And even at the time, like I couldn't even understand like why we were still there. And my understanding of like US wars is that they were like usually like pretty short at the time. And yeah, here we are like another 10 years from that. It's the US presence is finally drawing down. It's not over. I mean, it'll probably continue in the form of drone strikes, special forces raids, which are exceptionally deadly and kill lots of civilians. You can check out the film Dirty Wars for more information on that, or National Bird, which features one of our members, Daniel Hale, who's now in prison for blowing the whistle on the drone program, and it's killing of civilians, which it just did again the other day. A drone strike killed 9 civilians in retaliation for the suicide bombing at the airport. But yeah, for like a lot of people, hopefully like some younger people who are watching this who weren't alive on 9/11, don't remember much about it. I know in doing the kind of like youth organizing and kind of recruiting stuff we do, a lot of kids, high school kids, middle school kids, don't understand why we invaded Iraq, why we invaded Afghanistan, what's been going on in the war since then. And certainly a lot of the atrocities that the US commits aren't being taught to them. So hopefully this serves as a way for you folks to learn the true history of the war on terror, the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, what's been going on in the occupation since to the invasion in 2001. It's been going on for 20 years now, and just speak some stuff like Ollie said too. If you're a vet, don't try not to like center yourself right now. It's not about your feelings. There's spaces for that. We're literally in an organization that's like just for that. If you need to like talk about it or process this stuff, you can join our group and talk about it with other vets. You can go down to the VFW. But especially if you're someone who like opposes the wars or like calls yourself progressive, this is not about you. It's not about your feelings. So uplift the demands of people in Afghanistan, of diaspora leaders, center what they are saying, what they are talking about. Try for once to not make it about yourself. I know that's really hard as like a veteran, to not demand people essentially thank you for your service or like feel bad for you for losing a war. But yeah, you kind of like need to get over that. And if you were like one of the people who were naive enough to think you were helping people, like now's an opportunity to actually do that. Instead of bombing them and shooting them, you can actually, financially assist Afghans trying to get out of Afghanistan, people who are in refugee camps in neighboring countries, people who are trying to get to the US. It's people who need your money you made on deployment, that nice combat pay. People are going to need hosts and homes. There's going to need to be like pressure on lawmakers to change laws and to admit people, to make it easier to host in the system. This issue is like very intersectional. There's just a piece about it here in LA where Afghan refugees can't even afford housing here because the price of housing is so high. And no one's really assisting them in that. So yeah, now's the time to like actually do something, get involved, find out how you can help. If you're in the middle of nowhere, you can always just donate, you can uplift stuff. There's really no limitations to what you can do, even if you're geographically limited, or if you're disabled, there's plenty of ways to get involved. And I think that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thanks, John. That was powerful. I appreciate you and your words. Let's see. Next up, we have Dr. Amaha Halal. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and you can just call me Maha. So my name is Maha Halal. I am co-director of Justice for Muslims Collective, where I focus on political consciousness and narrative shifting. And in that vein, I think that this is, as we are close to the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, I think that this is a powerful moment to think about narratives, especially surrounding the war on terror, and narratives that have been rooted in paternalism, imperialism, etc., as we have seen acutely in the case of Afghanistan. But the place I want to start is this idea of mourning. So obviously every year on 9/11, there's this idea that we are sort of mourning not just the people who died in the attacks on the World Trade Center, but also this idea of the United States as it was perceived to have been pre-9/11. The United States, as it's constructed, right, is about this country that was living peacefully. It didn't bother anyone. It wasn't inflicting any violence. And all of a sudden, there was this terrorist attack that disrupted the way of Americans' way of life as they knew it. And when we think about the ways in which this narrative and story is constructed around mourning, what it actually really does is to leverage and prioritize the lives of Americans over the lives of everyone else, including, obviously, the many people that the United States has targeted, both domestically and abroad. And it creates different levels of empathy, if there is empathy anyways, for people that are being targeted by the United States under the guise of the construction of terrorism. And so when we face and encounter the narrative this coming Saturday, right, which is the 20-year anniversary, you're going to hear about how the United States changed, how the victims' lives were impacted, and obviously that's important. I read a piece where they described the victims of the 9/11 attacks as having been murdered. That's an accurate characterization. I've never heard, however, the United States or the media saying that people in Afghanistan have been murdered, people in Syria have been murdered, people in Iraq have been murdered. It's either collateral damage, it's loss of civilian lives, but it's as if there's no direct cause. We don't know how this happened to these people. And so that sort of transitions from this idea of mourning and who are we allowed to mourn. Afghanistan is also, an acute example of the narrative that the United States continues to use, namely, and I think Arash had touched on this, just the idea that this country is generous and benevolent, right? You could see that especially in Biden's last couple of speeches where, he said things along the lines of, well, we tried and it was the Afghans' responsibility to, take control of their country. So we did what we could. And if you just heard his speech without knowing the context, you would assume that Afghans are the ones that asked the United States to come and rescue them. That was never the case. And it's also just never the case in general when it comes to the countries that the United States has targeted and invaded and colonized. And I think there's an important idea here that keeps being expressed, right? The idea that Biden finally ended a war. He put an end to these endless wars. War as it's used in that context is very limited. The definition of war that's being used is that there's no troops on the ground. To me, that doesn't constitute an end of war. Number one, we know that that's not true anyway. But number two, even if war isn't immediately visible, war is also about the presence of violence and the omnipresence of U.S.'s state violence. It's not just about troops that we can see on the ground. And so it's very enraging, quite frankly, when the U.S. talks about ending war. The U.S. doesn't end wars. The U.S. wars just morph into other wars in order to target the greatest number of people. And I think the last thing I'll say, just for the purpose of time, is, a lot of the narratives and discourses around this 20-year anniversary have talked about lessons learned. And, it's unclear exactly what the government has learned, because if you actually believe that the government waged this entire war on terror to combat terrorism, number one, it would reflect on what it is actually doing to perpetuate conflict and war. And number two, it would cease the use of so many of its strategies that really don't solve anything and make problems worse. So, are the lessons learned by the United States government that we should stop killing people, that we should stop droning people? Maybe it's not okay to surveil people. What are the lessons learned by government? And, I don't think we'll ever have that question answered, because the US simply does not want peace. This country does not want peace. And when we begin to understand that, and I'm sure we all agree on, for probably most of those viewing, we can agree on this point that the US does not want peace. And that's why it makes sense that it's not working towards peace, and none of its strategies and tactics can be interpreted as going and moving towards that goal.
Thank you everyone for sharing your powerful thoughts, your work, and really just speaking from your chest. I think it's so critically important in this moment that we have this discussion, as you can see reflected in the chat. And for those people who are out there that, are new to this conversation, or really just don't have a good concept of what's been happening over these last 20 years, but let's be honest, even before that, if you think about the buildup, I think it's important, for everyone to have something that they can go to, that they can read, learn, or engage. I know I dropped, some information in the chat around the Justice for Muslims Collective. On that page, there's resources. As long as you have internet, which is a privilege, go out on YouTube and, search for, real connections to just understand some of the background and context and the pain that, mainstream media just doesn't cover the full story. It has always centered the loss of veterans, right? Even, here most recently. And if you remember years ago, there was a, daily tracker on the side of the screen, which, is to patriotize all of what was happening. But those who have been, in those, regions, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, and all of the other conflict areas where the military is, I can understand that this is, probably heavy conversation. But again, remember, if you don't know, or you confused, or you want to reach out to someone about Face Veterans Against the War, we are always willing to talk with folks. And the resources, like I said, Justice for Muslims .org is a place that you can go. Also, I saw in the chat, someone was asking how to contact Nazrin. We dropped that. So if you are interested and want somewhere to go to learn more, to be supported, you're not alone. I do think it is critically important, because it's a different conversation depending on where you've spent your last 20 years. So for some people, it's hard. I'll say, for instance, some veterans find it very hard not to feel centered, again, because that's been the theme. So I'm curious, Ali, if you can talk a little bit more about, just a little bit more, peel that onion back when you talk about how veterans, center themselves, and what type of advice would you offer them? And then, John, if you want to jump in and add some thoughts there too.
Thanks, Natasha. I think it's a really tricky question, because we want vets to use their voices, and the reason that is effective is because of military exceptionalism and American exceptionalism. And when a veteran has a viewpoint that is outside of the stereotype of what veterans are supposed to be, it can be powerful. However, like we've been talking about, there's this culture of us just talking about ourselves, and it's not acceptable. That misses the mark so completely. So I feel like, there is a place for your voice as a veteran, but you have to be really smart about how you do it. And you need to be in keeping with the demands of the people you're supporting, in this case, the Afghani people. But even just saying Afghani people, it can be more complicated than that. When you say you want to support Native people, it can be more complicated than that. These are not, necessarily a singular group of people who you can just pick one and then follow them and say whatever they say. You have to critically think. And what I do is I just try to translate my skills into something that's useful to these movements. It's not about what I have to say. Some of you might listen to me and be like, wow, this guy, thinks cool stuff, whatever. But these are all things that have been taught to me. These are not original ideas. These are things that I've learned from people that I respect. And when I was at Line 3, we had a lot of problems with people taking up too much space. And one thing that somebody said that was very wise was like, before you speak, look around and take account of who is there. Is there somebody that is more able to speak to this than you? If there is, shut up. Another wise person once said to me, before you talk, ask yourself why you're talking. And if you can't answer that question, once again, maybe you shouldn't be talking. And I didn't mean to sound so harsh, but I am very upset that we're centering ourselves again. And I know we've all been taught to do that, but it's time to break that cycle and to be honest about, what we did in the military. We were more dangerous to everyone else than they were to us. So where do we get off centering our trauma when we're the oppressor and the conqueror and stuff? I don't care how the Spanish feel about colonization. I don't care how the English feel about colonization, neither do you. So why should we care so hard about vets? And the answer to that is that we have all been conditioned because of military exceptionalism and American exceptionalism, to believe that any old thing that comes out of a veteran's mouth is something that you should listen to. And us as veterans need to be aware of when we are outside of our lane, because if people are listening to you talk about string theory or something, or physics, because you're a vet, you are reinforcing military and American exceptionalism, which is not cool. And we have to be cognizant of that. We can't drag our veteran identity out for any old thing and get attention. It's very disgusting and it's off point. That's all I got.
Thank you, Ollie, for that context. John, you want to add any thoughts here?
Yeah, real quick, if you're gonna speak as a veteran, one of those things, it should just be to say stop centering and listening to veterans so much about everything. We don't have the right or even best opinions about most things, especially most vets who still subscribe to the idea that we were fighting terrorists, that the invasions were necessary for the safety of Americans. The wars have been pretty unpopular. They're definitely unpopular before the invasion. I remember the massive protests, the splits in our own family around it. So if you're one of those people who doesn't support the wars, then think a little more critically about the people who carried it out. And I'm personally I don't need people to feel bad for me. I don't need people to constantly go to bat for me online and be oh, the poor veterans. I can handle it myself. I can handle, we talk about, the class analysis and all the other things that go into people being preyed upon and joining the military, but that doesn't absolve you from your role in it. So yeah, I feel if you're gonna try to recognize that as vets, we have privilege, utilize it to try and destroy that privilege. Say people are going to listen to you at times, and you can even just use that to give your time and space to other people. Which it seems ironic for me to be doing that right now. So maybe I'll just do that right now. Let someone else talk.
No, thank you, John. That feels right. And a perfect segue to where I would really like to focus the majority of the time that we have left, in this space. Right before we transition to more questions from the folks joining us on social media, another reminder that if you have a question, we will get to them here shortly. Please drop them in the chat and we'll get to them, like I said, in short order. For our Afghan, panel who are on now for the, doing the work for the Afghan peoples right now. I'm really curious to hear, what can people do right now? What is the most immediate need that either, in your work that you see happening? Is there something specific that people can do right now this evening? If you have like specific links or places you would like for them to go, please lift that up now. Thank you.
So this is a disaster. There are so many people right now that are in need. There are folks back in Afghanistan that are in need of food. They're in need of water. I don't know how to organize those things, and I don't know if folks are organizing those, or if there are folks organizing those things. If people do know, please drop it in the chat so we can start spreading the word. Things that you can do right now locally is support the refugees that are arriving. We are in need of legal services. We are in need of housing. So if you have, one of the things that we're doing in Minnesota is one of the folks are creating a database of housing. So if people have a room available in their house to let someone stay in, or an apartment, or whatever it is, and how many people can stay, we'll have an entire database available for folks. I believe there are other states that are doing that as well. If you want to do something tonight, donate at zakah.org. They take, it's a Muslim-run organization, and they 98% of your donation goes directly to the causes. We've done tons of work with them in the past in our community, supporting folks in encampments, supporting a lot of houseless folks as well. And so they do really good work, and they're really trusted within the community. So zakah.org. Can you think of other things? There are folks organizing support to get funds to people to get them out of Afghanistan. So there are GoFundMes that are being sent around that you can help support if you want to also support that financially.
So there's a lot of Afghans that are doing amazing work right now throughout the US and even abroad. I would say the most important thing you can do right now is amplify those voices, amplify those Afghan voices, because the voices have been silenced for long enough. And I think it's time to hear Afghans and what they want. There's a lot of folks that I know that are organizing in the East Coast. I think Lita is one of those folks. A lot of folks are organizing in the West Coast. So just find out who these people are, find out what their needs are, work with them, find out how you can help. But as far as what's going on in Afghanistan, I think the most important thing you can do is find out ways where U.S. can stop funding folks that are out there to destabilize Afghanistan, because it's just been one thing after another. It started in 1978. Well, it started before that, but 1978 is when it went to another level. Afghanistan has been completely destroyed ever since, and that's mostly because Afghan lives have been used.
Yeah, and I just want to add something as well to that. I do want to echo what Arash and Nasreen just said. Afghans for a Better Tomorrow, we are advocating for humanitarian aid for Afghan civil society. We are also advocating for more Afghan refugees to be accepted in the United States, more than just U.S. citizens, and more than like SIVs and P1 and P2 Afghans. So for us, what you can also do on top of donating and amplifying Afghan voices is calling your congressional members and advocating for these demands. I think it's great if they can hear it from other voices rather than just Afghan voices, especially folks from across the country. I also do want to add emphasis on supporting the Afghan diaspora in supporting Afghan refugees. I think that's really important. Our community is like working at capacity, trying to support the new refugees coming in as well. So I think advocacy is a really great way. Amplifying our voices, making us still relevant is really important because the media has like dropped off significantly. And supporting like your local community and bringing in Afghan refugees.
Thank you. Maha, do you want to add, just in terms of in relation to your work, what do you think is needed in this moment, particularly leading up to this weekend when we know what we'll see in the mainstream media around the 20th year after 9/11 and how, the framing will be. And we know that has been flashpoints in the past. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts here, Maha, and what, people can really do and how to really be more of a better neighbor in this moment.
One of the things I personally focus on is, as I've mentioned, narratives. And I think there's a lot of work to be done to reject the dominant narrative around the war on terror, that the United States had no choice but to wage violence, right? Among other things, that somehow state violence, especially US state violence, is somehow morally superior to non-state actor violence. And obviously the point is not to condone either kind of violence, but when you legitimize and justify state violence, then basically the US has enabled itself to do whatever it wants, to utilize whatever tactics it wants to utilize. So I think there's just so many ways, right? You can think about the many speeches that Biden has just given on Afghanistan. Typically, with when we're talking about the war on terror and specifically what happens on 9/11 itself, right? Presidential speeches basically virtually echo every speech before from 9/11, right? So it's a rehashing of the story of the war on terror, 9/11, what happened, who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist, why do groups abroad, hate us for our freedoms? What is their real antagonism? Why are Muslims so angry? There's many, many, many narratives. And it's not just the sort of overtly problematic and Islamophobic narratives. It's also the ways that the United States couches its violence in benevolent terms, which, we talked about previously. So to me, one of the most important things is to reject and challenge these narratives. Obviously, that means when there's a war on Afghanistan, war on Iraq, right? The privileging of the narrative shift should be for people from those countries to actually have a platform to speak and for them to challenge what is happening and how the narrative is telling their story. Because the United States, what's really critical about narrative is that it helps shape policy. And that's a lot of the ways that policies are justified is vis-a-vis narratives. And, I'm sure we're going to hear many, many, many stories that have been, again, rehashed from the early days of the war on terror in terms of why this happened in the United States. And as to be expected, there will be absolutely no reflection on the part of the government in terms of why we are where we are today. No one across the globe, around the world, needs the US's violence. What the United States could do and could contribute to actual peace would be to stop running the country as if it's its own war and that it can continue to perpetuate just mass violence across the globe. So I'm not sure if I'm saying anything that's, especially different than what anyone else would say. But again, I just think that this is an opportune time to challenge a lot of the narratives and to really deconstruct the ways specifically that the United States talks about and justifies its state violence.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's really powerful. When I think about this weekend, like you all have said, there are going to be things that, would just have you scream like, oh my goodness, that is not true. I'm curious to hear from y'all. What are some of the things that you anticipate, being discussed this weekend that just are not true, or if you want to provide, more context to what, people, will hear. So what do you think is some of the propaganda that comes up in, that we can anticipate this weekend? Anyone feel free to jump in here.
What I'm worried about really right now, what Afghanistan is the propaganda for more war. Right now, there's a lot of propaganda on backing up Masood's son, I forgot his first name, in the Panjshir Valley. They're the group that's fighting the Taliban, and Saleh, who was the ex-vice president of Afghanistan. The thing is, Saleh is a CIA guy, and Masood is an ex-CIA guy. His son went and trained in the UK and also is backed by the French intelligence service. And yes, of course, as Afghans, we don't want this foreign group, the Taliban in Afghanistan. But at the same time, we don't want perpetual war either. We don't want the same thing that's been going on there for the past 40-something years. And we don't want backing for the same groups that have destroyed Afghanistan, that are backed by Western powers or outside powers. What I'm worried about is there being, again, what the U.S. really does is it funds both sides, right? The U.S. funds groups because that's where the money is in war. I'm worried about now all of a sudden all the military aid going to this group. So there's more devastation. So as an Afghan, I'm worried about that. But at the same time, what you've seen historically is that once the war ends in one area, and it starts at a different area. So what's US's next plan? What are they looking to invade next? What are they looking to occupy next? So just watch out for that kind of propaganda. Watch out for new boogeymans. Watch out for new wars or continuation of old wars, and don't necessarily fall into those narratives or buy into those narratives.
Yeah, that's a great point. For someone someone asked a question in the chat. Next time an attack is used as a reason to go to war, can you give us a better way to handle the reaction? And what would be other solutions besides going to war that we can advocate for? Anyone have any thoughts they'd like to share there? I feel like we've sort of talked about it, but if we can just give, more finer points. If you remember, and just to give a little bit more context before you answer, Arash, thinking about years prior and the national response around the invasion of both Afghanistan and Iraq, we definitely don't want to repeat that. And so just to give that piece of context for folks who might not remember, I'm sure this is where this question comes from.
Yeah, what countries? Here you go. This has been a very serious talk, so the cat's a good way to kind of
That's good.
Use a conversation a little bit. But countries like Afghanistan and Iraq need reparations. They don't need more military. They don't need anything else. They need reparations. The U.S. has stole billions and trillions of dollars from Afghanistan. Same thing with Iraq. Like all that oil. I mean, who's making the big cut of it are the U.S. corporations and the British corporations. So we don't need any more military aid. We don't need to be saved, as the propaganda goes right now. We need reparations. We need a true democratic system where the Afghans decide for themselves what they want to do. No more proxy wars. No more funding people to destabilize Afghanistan. We need reparations. in a true sense. No?
Oh, please jump in. That's right.
We also need this like sad hopelessness energy to go away. Afghanistan is full of really we're strong people. We are, all of us, men, women, children, whoever, whatever religion you are, it is a diverse community of people. We have lived together for thousands of years. We are strong people. So this idea that it's over, this idea of sadness, we need to get past this grieving, and we need to start rallying and start organizing. Especially those of us in the diaspora, because we are privileged and we can be sad. We have the privilege of being sad because we can sit in our bedrooms and cry, but the rest of them are not. A lot of the folks in Afghanistan and the refugees that we see in the rest of the world, they don't have those privileges. So those of us, especially with privilege, we need to step up and we need to do what we can. And those of you who supported these wars or who were involved in the violence against us, we also need you to step up.
Very well said. I know one of the other, oh, John, you wanted to jump in here and share some thoughts? Please go ahead.
Yeah, just really quick on that note, like folks need to stop thinking of the US and US military as some kind of like liberating or humanitarian force. There's plenty of well-documented history around it of like what the US and its interventions actually do. If you're an American and you're having trouble like understanding that we're not the good guys, you can go way back to Smedley Butler's War is a Racket. There's a Winter Soldier testimonies from both Vietnam and from what our organization did in the Iraq War. There's no shortage of documentation out there. So when you hear about US being sent into a country or back into a country and remaining, you need to think about like what that actually involves and what that entails and what the troops are really doing over there.
That's the truth. One of my former units would help write the media or the press release for what was said on the evening news, and the complete opposite is what would happen during the day. So that's real. The false narrative is a real thing. Let's see. I know that we are coming up close to time. There are so many things that I know, questions, but I really just want to give time and go around to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share some final thoughts as we prepare to close. So I think we can go in the order in which you all spoke. Lita, please, if you can have the floor, and then we'll go around. And if we have time for one more question before we head out, we'll do that. But please give us some, final thoughts before we move to close.
Yeah, thank you, Tasha. I just want to echo some points that were made earlier. So elevate Afghan voices and help us stay relevant is very important. Showing up also, if you see any sort of protest, and I hope they continue, please show up, be an ally. The so-called war on terror infrastructure has harmed Afghans for the last 20 years at least. And the conflict and repression continues for Afghans, and the attack outside of the Karzai International Airport that we saw a couple of weeks ago is a sneak peek of the lives in Afghanistan, which is hopeless, defeated, and terrified. They're also stuck between ISIS and Taliban bombs and US drone strikes. So the United States, if they're serious about ending a forever war, it must immediately end drone strikes and pay reparations, as Arash was mentioning earlier. True reparations, but also humanitarian aid to Afghan civil society that were left behind and obviously betrayed by the United States. That is the United States owes the Afghan people. So happy to be on here and very happy to share the space with these amazing folks.
Thank you. Ali, I know you don't have video, but we can hear your voice. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't have much else to say other than that Afghan people asking us to show up and support them as veterans is a privilege. Like, they have every reason to not want us around. Just like, a lot of other people I work with have every reason to not want me around, and they still accept me, despite what I've done. And it's a privilege to be able to heal like that and to actually be able to help people. So I just want us as veterans to appreciate that people want us to show up when they have every right to distrust us, and that we need to honor that, and we need to be trustworthy, and we need to do the right thing. And I know those are all very sort of cliche phrases, do the right thing, but we can do it. And if you're confused about how to show up, just know that a lot of us are, and you can come over to About Face and we can work it out together. And that's it.
Thank you, Ali. Let's see, Nazrin and Arash.
My final thoughts, end the hopelessness. Let's all organize and get together and fight this together. We are stronger as a community. Also, make sure that we don't forget the other folks that are hurting. We talk a lot about the women that are hurting in Afghanistan, but we don't talk enough about the Hazara community. We don't talk enough about the Shia community, the Sikhs, the Hindus, the queer community, the artists. Taliban is hurting a lot of people and erasing a lot of culture and a lot of humanity right now. And so I want to make sure that we don't forget them. We need to not forget them. Go ahead, baby.
Let's not forget that Taliban are creation of the US. Let's not forget the reason Afghanistan is in war is because of the US and the Soviets. Let's not forget that we are on stolen indigenous land. Let's not forget that African slaves were brought into this country, and this is the reason the country has its wealth that it has. Let's keep in mind that as long as the system of capitalism exists, there's always going to be this class divide, and there's always going to be a need for more resources, stealing of resources from other countries and other nations. So no matter what we do, if it's not Afghanistan, it's going to be somewhere else. And like I said earlier, this has happened over and over again throughout history. Afghanistan is not the first time this has happened to, or the first country this has happened to. If you want to get to the root of the issue, we have to destroy the causes of all this. And it starts with patriarchy, then it goes to capitalism, it goes to white supremacy and nationalism. And that's why we are where we are.
Patriarchy.
Well said. Thank you, Arash and Nazreen. Y'all were just great. John, the floor is yours. Final thoughts.
Just real quick, if you're a vet and you're going to identify as one, you need to be organizing as one. I don't feel like you get to walk away from this stuff. There's no shortage of work to be done to actually help the people of the countries we invaded. So just follow along, whether you just need to subscribe to like our mailing list, social media, stuff like that to find the next call for action. But show up in person if you can, and do whatever you can to support all the work that the other folks here tonight are doing.
That's real. Thank you, John. Maha, the floor is yours. Final words.
I would just say that we should take every opportunity to just continue to reject the official and government narrative. I mean, regarding the question that was asked earlier, in terms of, next time an attack is used as a reason to go to war, what is a better way to handle the reaction? After the 9/11 attacks happened, Bush's speech about, let's say, how many days later, maybe 9 days later on the 20th, he basically programmed and told people what to think about what had caused the war, namely that, these people just hate our freedoms and they don't like democracy and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of this is getting ahead of that narrative, because the US is going to continue to utilize this narrative because it wants to continue to inflict mass violence on countries across the globe. So it's important that we understand, deconstruct, continue to reject, and uplift the most impacted voices, and to really just dismantle these extremely problematic Islamophobic narratives that just continue to be perpetuated and disguise the real state violence that continues to be inflicted by the US onto Muslim communities and other communities, both domestically and abroad.
Powerful. Again, as you all can see reflected in the comments here in the chat, I know that there is, so much, to really to unpack. So again, we've dropped links in the chat. Folks who are in this space are inviting you to events happening this weekend. I see folks inviting you, whether you're on the West Coast, whether you're in Chicago. There's an event happening to be in community, to learn more, to talk to folks in your own community, get involved, get organized, and where you might have questions. Again, there are resources and people out there that you can touch to learn more and really, be a good neighbor and an ally in this moment. As we move to close, I want us to really, again, just to thank the panel again for your time, for being gracious enough to be here this evening. Man, I think this was a really great conversation, and I'm really excited, that we are, helping folks understand that there's going to be a lot of narratives that are going to happen this weekend, and there's a way to really, push back against that, to have conversations with your neighbors where there may be confusion. And I'll just keep saying that because I think it's so critically important, even in my own family, and in, people that I talk to that just don't really understand what's happening in this moment. There's an opportunity for you to learn, grow, and really just, again, open your chest. So again, thank you so much for everyone for being on this evening. I don't see any more questions in the chat, just powerful reflections from you all sharing this evening. So I want to say again to everyone who's joining us, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, this conversation is one of many that we're going to continue to have. It's not just around the 20th, if you will, year of 9/11. We're going to continue to have conversations with people who are in the movement and doing this work. Stay tuned with us. If you're not already connected to About Face, either on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter, we'll be dropping more of these DemilitarizeU spaces where we hope that you'll join us. If you want to reach out to us, you can contact us at staff@aboutfaceveterans.org. If you are a post 9/11 veteran and interested in joining us, visit our website, aboutfaceveterans.org, and become a member. This event is streamed across our social media and will be available, going forward for you to watch and engage. Continue to drop your comments in the chat. People are going to watch this, after this evening. So if you have events that are coming up, continue to drop those in the chat, and other places where people can engage with your work. Again, thank you so much. This is great. And I just, again, want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. Y'all be well, take care of one another, and be a good neighbor. Take care. Good night.